Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of card making for Scrapbookers. So Caitlin and I have chosen to use Flair on our layouts today, and I think we're both using the epoxy Flair from Scrap and Happy Studios because that Flair is fabulous for cards. So I've put myself in a little bit of a spending freeze for as long as I possibly can. We'll see how long I last because I have so many things in my stash that I've purchased and never even opened. And so I'm going to try to use up some of those things in the next coming weeks. Starting with these paper pads. So these are paper pads from Brutus Monroe, and they're beautiful. They're beautiful fall colors. I have one that's called Autumn Foliage and one that's called Pumpkin Spice, I believe, is the name of them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of these patterns. I'm going to pick 2 patterns out for each of my cards. I'm going to be creating 2 cards today. Another thing that I grabbed out of my stash that I've never used is a set of stamps and dies from the stamp market. And those have actually been in my stash for maybe longer than a year. So definitely time to pull some of these goodies out and use them. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to create my 2 card bases, and then I'm going to create full card panels for the fronts of my cards. Each of these papers are measured down. One is, they're 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and then the second layer is measured down to 1/2 inch. So that would be 5 by 3 3/4. No matter what I do when I make my own card bases, I always need to give my cards a bit of a trim when I put the card panels on top of them. So I'm just going to do that right away, and everything's going to get inked up with some Distressed Photo Oxide ink, Vintage Photo Distress Photo. It's Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink. Oh my. And then I'm going to layer these 2 patterns on top of each other. So I really love how these cards turned out in the end. I think they're super duper pretty and just full of fall fun. I'm going to go ahead now and do this to my second card layer, and then I'm going to go off camera and I'm going to do a ton of die cutting, and then we're going to make some stacked die cut sentiments for our cards. So for one card, it's just going to have a nice hello title, and the stamp and die set I got, so there's a stamp set that has the stamped sentiments and then the dies, and I cut the dies out 4 times, the hello sentiment 4 times, the paper hug sentiment 4 times, and then I'm just layering them on top of each other. You don't need a crystal katana. I intentionally did one of these layers so you could see that there's no special tool required, but that crystal katana does come in handy, and it works really well for things like stacking these die cuts. This is going to create a lovely dimensional embellishment to the front of the card. It's going to sit up away from the card, and it turns out really, really nice. I'm also going to go ahead and give these a little bit of an edge with Vintage Photo Distress Oxide. In hindsight, I maybe shouldn't have done this because I think that it made the sentiments blend in a little more than into the background than I would have liked, but they still look quite pretty, and I'm still very happy with the results. So just a word of advice: if you want to try something like this and you're going to use some busier background papers, maybe hold off on the ink around the edges. Okay, so I'm using my T-square ruler to try to make these sentiments even and spaced well, and I do a pretty good job with the paper hug sentiment, but the hello sentiment is kind of off to the side. We're going to fix that with embellishment so it doesn't quite look lopsided on the finished product. So let's talk a little bit about epoxy flares. So Scrap and Happy Studio makes epoxy flares, and they are a flat flare, which means if you like the look of flare, so if you like the big bulky kind of button looking flares, but you have issues with them rusting or issues with some of the bulk because they can get a bit bulky, epoxy flares are fabulous. They're fairly flat. They have a very, very little bit of a dimension, but it's not bad at all. They come in so many shapes, or not shapes, but so many designs. They're so, so, so cute. So I have lots and lots of epoxy Flair for the fall season in my stash, and I just pulled, I don't know, 3 or 4 different packs out, and I'm kind of just using them and moving them all around. For the first card, I decided just to put one epoxy Flair right there in the middle, and then I have these fun gold leaf-shaped sequins from Spiegelmom Scraps that I'm going to use just as fun little accents on my cards. And so here's our second card. Again, I'm using my T-square ruler, and I do a much, 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 much better job this time of getting everything centered on the card. So these cards, one says hello, one says paper hug, and the inside of both says, I'm not just a card, I'm a hug with a fold in it, which I think is the cutest sentiment, and I just love it. So I just stamped that sentiment inside the card with that same brown distress ink, and it looks super cute. I can't wait to send these out. For my second card, I decide on 3 different epoxy flares just to give it a little more decor on the front. This is a different pack. So the epoxy flares came from 2 different packs. And this one, most epoxy flare packages have, I think, 6 in them. Some have 9, some have 3. Just depends on the style of them and what you want. So I'm going to adhere these down, and I'm going to do the same thing. Again, I'm just going to add some of those gold leaf sequins from Spiegelmom Scraps onto the card as an additional accent. And we are going to call these done. I so love how these turned out. I think they turned out really cute and really sweet, and I'm really excited to send them out and give them to friends. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and make sure you head over to Caitlin's channel. Caitlin does this series with me every month. I think we've been doing it for well over a year now, or maybe just about a year. So we've been enjoying it very, very much. That's something a little different for us to get out of and do something that's not necessarily a 12 by 12 layout. So I'll talk to you all again very soon. Actually, I'll talk to you all again later tonight. So bye.